throughout the year. I know that three of you, this is going to be your first budget, so that's why I thought we would go over some of this today and talk about it. Our goal is when you have a question or something that you would like to make sure that's in the budget, that you share that with us tonight. Let's put it together and see. We'll get some better figures when we get the revenue and the things together. Some estimates of number of students at Stewart's Creek High and that sort of thing, which we're still compiling. The second one there, the number 2, this evening's focus will be on the existing staff and programs for 12-13 general purpose school budget and the changes we anticipate for 13-14. In other words, we're going to compare the numbers for 13-14 with what we have with 12-13. And that's basically where we have to start each year. 3, it's early in the budget process. We'll be addressing the Oklahoma Stewart's Creek High School growth and other changes as more data, especially Stewart's Creek High School student data becomes available. We know already from what Mr. Evans has received that a significant number of students are exercising the option to grandfather or siblings. We're in the 600 number or so because that would include Riverdale and some of the others, but it may be a little more than that. So we're seeing a significant number that are going to exercise that option. They were to turn it in by Friday, but they're still going through and sorting those. May be involved in that. We should have more from that by next week to know for sure what we're going to come up with there. Then we're going to the first page, which is a modified version of the monthly financial summary. And I'm going to let Mr. Sandvig kind of begin to walk you through that. That's this one that's colored with the spreadsheet. As he kind of goes down line item by line item, one of the best comparisons when you're looking at a budget is the percentage, because numbers change, of course, from year to year. But at this stage of the year, when you're about 5 months into it, about 4 months left, because when you look at the 180-day school year, up in January, near the 1st of February, you will complete the 5th month. So many of the numbers that you're looking at tonight would be through about 5 months of the school year. So you're a little over half. Mr. Sanders, would you want to start down and look at it line by line? And once again, please stop us. If you want to ask a question or suggestion to add something, let's stop and we'll talk about where it might be.
And I chose to work from this format because I email it to y'all each month. These are tentative February numbers. With property taxes being due on the 28th, they weren't able to close quite as quickly at the courthouse as usual. The one number that I know is missing, that is wrong here, is the trustees commission. The others should be extremely close. And just they hadn't processed that yet when I pulled this together. The biggest piece of our budget is our staff and our benefits. And that as a percentage of our budget has gone up in the 15 years I've been here. We used to be more in the 70s. And that has crept up to about 82.5% of the GPS budget. A lot of that increase, our retirement rates have gone up over the years. When I was here early on, we were getting pretty good returns in the stock market on that part of the state retirement funds portfolio and all. We've had to make higher contributions in recent years. Actually, they've dropped off from what they were at their highest. We hope that will continue. Medical insurance goes up and up. This year is unusual. Generally, I have to amend some money in for additional medical insurance because of additional people opting for our medical insurance. We're going to have some money left in that line item this year, which is a good point. And for this part of our budget, once we fill a position, we really don't have much control over its cost for that next year and the benefits that flow along with it. Our employees have the right under our insurance plan to choose individual spouse or family coverage, and the premiums vary depending on that.
What is your estimate now of benefits and all for a teacher? Say you hire BS and zero or about what is
I
it?
budget a little higher than that.
We usually do BS and 3 or
Yeah,
5 for
a
budget
3 or
purposes.
4, and my rough number is up to $60,000. 8.8% retirement that we pay. The teachers pay 5%. That's withheld from their checks, and we are currently contributing 8.8. One of my early years here, it was like 3.46 that we were contributing. It's up to 8.8, and that has dropped down a bit from its peak. So when you put that and the Social Security Medicare on top, my rough number is about 60,000. So,
On insurance,
yes, sir.
we're obliged to pay what Rutherford County employees are paid, correct? As a board, do we have any leeway in that?
We have kept them priced the same, and we have been able to keep our contribution comparable to the county's contribution for county general.
I'm just asking, but the question is, we're not obligated to that?
We try to go along with the county.
I'm with you.
But no, we are not strictly obligated. There is a number that we are obligated to contribute toward insurance. That number is low enough, we're in no danger of being under that number. And I'd have to look that number up. I don't have it right at hand. It's in the $4,000 range with the BEP state local share number, but we're more than covered by that.
Okay.
The state sends some monies through for insurance because there's, of course, a state insurance plan, and Rutherford County is self-insured. Basically, that insurance. So what he's talking about is that money from the state that required when they send some monies through the BEP to cover some insurance. It's basically for that state plan is what we're looking like.
And that is one area in the BEP formula that is underfunded because it got set up initially as a 10-month expenditure when it is a 12-month expenditure. The legislature, I don't believe, will be addressing that this year, but it's kind of on the radar again.
That was one of our requests.
Right.
For legislation, because you just can't stop paying after 10 months. You either pay the 12 months during the first 10 months or something, but it's still 12 months of insurance coverage.
Yeah. Any questions on staff or benefits? I realize it's the biggest number.
What is the split on insurance? You mentioned on retirement it's 5% and 8.8%.
It varies depending on which option we have. Starting January 1, we have our deductible plan, the old option 2. We have a copay plan, which is really more similar in many ways to the way the state program is now. And we have a health reimbursement account. So the deductible is most expensive, copay, and the health reimbursement is the least expensive, both to the employee and to us as an employee. So you've got 3 tiers that way, and then we have 4 groups. It's a grid of 12 prices. We have individual only, employee and spouse, employee and dependent children, and employee, spouse, and children. So it's a 12-way grid.
Whether from a HR perspective or an accounting perspective, do we have a strategic influence as to how we match or pay in that hopes to direct the employees to the least expensive?
Our pricing structure is moving that way. It has over the last several years. Yeah.
Likewise, now with the retirement contribution, you and I have discussed, and I'll say, in the board's discussion of these things, there may be issues that we explore that are not necessarily proposals, but just in the sake of discussion, we might explore something that is not something that we'll necessarily go toward. But is there an opportunity for us to have an equal retirement contribution between the employee and the system and have that phase in with new hires?
The state last year, and at the time I heard it had been pulled, but it did pass. The state now offers local governments, and it is my understanding that it would be the county commission that would have to make that choice. I think there are up to 3 plans that you could have change through legislation at your commission. And there's one with a 5% employee contribution. There's one with a 2.5%. And then there is one that I think is basically like a 401k, 403b option. And it might be a 457 plan. But the state did allow, and I think I'm correct in those 3 options. There is also legislation being discussed that would make all new hire teachers go into a plan that would still be 5% contributory, but would have reduced benefits. That is something the legislature may be addressing.
But all of those options are beyond the scope of this board?
That is my understanding, that it is something that has to be adopted at the county level. If it were adopted at the county level, I think it would flow through to us for our classified staff. But that was the answer I got when I asked.
So it would not be possible, if the board were to choose, that a 5% contribution and an 8.8% contribution.
Well, the 8.8 is the employer side. Okay.
But that's the employer side, right? If we wanted to take that and move it to a 6.5 and 6.5.
No, we do not have that option.
We do not have that option. Okay. We can't move our 8.8% contribution?
No. No.
All we can do is
for new employees, and again, it's my understanding it would have to be at the county level.
Okay.
Initially, it would affect our new classified, but they would come in under a plan where they would be contributory, and therefore, as an employer, we would make a lower contribution.
And you specify classified. Are certified a whole different set of rules?
That is a proposal that's floating around at the Capitol this session to change the rules for new certified.
Maybe a 401 type
Yeah,
versus TCRS.
yeah.
But that's a decision we cannot make.
Yeah.
Probably 25 years ago, there was a raise coming from the state, and the teachers in Tennessee had a choice. You had the choice of to take the raise or to apply it to the insurance. I mean, we had a choice of 2 ways to go in that, and so not insurance, but retirement. So the teachers chose at that time to continue to contribute to their retirement. So that's because other state employees, you get out of education, other state employees, I think the state pays virtually all of it, right?
Yes, they do now.
They pay about 100%. But the teachers elected at that time to continue contributing to it. And it was a financial thing really at that time. But it's at least been 25 years ago, I guess.
Would this be a good time to remind the board, especially the new members, about the makeup of the insurance committee that make a recommendation to the commission before they vote and make those decisions for us sometimes?
We have 2 representatives here, Ms. Barnes and Mr. Sandvig. How many people on the entire committee? Do you recall?
We have an REA representative that is also a school system employee. I think they're 14.
I think they're 14.
Sheriff's Department is represented, the Highway Department is represented, Community Care is represented.
A couple of county general departments are represented.
And then we have at-large members as well.
Yeah. Okay.
One more thing before we leave staff. Are the supplements, are they broken down or broken out in this anywhere where I can see?
No, they are not.
Okay.
When we get further in, and I could give you those numbers next week. The supplements that are BS and 5, actually the BS and 5 I've got. The BS and 5 supplements this year and change my titles. My view. We have the equivalent this year. Well, actually, okay, yeah. We will be right about the equivalent of 40 BS and 5 teaching positions. That goes to supplements
Okay.
for the BS and 5. That does not include those supplements you approve separately at the meetings, but those do not come out of the GPS budget. They're school funds or booster funds, school activity fund monies. So,
Define for me BS and 5.
most of our supplements that are paid as part of it's in our contract, even though it is a percentage of what a BS and 5 teacher makes. If you are a basketball coach who has an EDS in 40 years,
Okay.
your supplement will not be related to that degree and experience. It ties back to a BS and 5, which is just under 40,000
Okay.
for 100%.
What is the total amount that our
About
system?
$1.6 million plus benefits.
Okay.
Would that include, when you say supplements, does that include assistant principals? Are they considered a supplemental position?
No, that is not. These are just athletic, drama,
Understand.
annual, those separate ones. That I would call those indexes
Yeah.
and changes in number of days worked. Okay. And then the section on this page below the pink cells, those are non-employee expenditures. And I highlighted in yellow the ones over which we really don't have much control. We have made decisions in the past, yes, some of them we could unmake, but our bus contracts, our substitutes, our utilities, textbooks, property and casualty insurance, trustees, commission, workers' comp, from year to year, you don't have a great deal of control over those. We have been, I'm sure y'all remember, we've borrowed money for 3 different energy conservation programs in the last 7 to 8 years. We have paid the biggest of those notes off this fiscal year. But all in all, we don't have a great deal of control over those items.
Jeff, let me take 1 or 2 of those. Let's point out 2 or 3 things as we look at this. Looking at your bus contracts there, you notice that you know that you're going to have some upcoming amendments because we have spent 70.3% of the budget. And that's because we've been making fuel adjustments every month under the contract to do that. So you know before the year ends, you're going to be seeing amendment to cover that. So that kind of gives you an idea of what we're talking about there. You can see substitutes, utilities. Utilities is pretty much the last column out there is your 11 and 12. At this same time period, what percentage we spent? And you can look at then at the 12, 13, and you can see what percent. That's what I was talking about. As you kind of look at the 2, kind of see what may be tracking the same. Might mention a thing or 2 of you for the textbooks, looking at that one, because you're only at 20.7% and 14% last year. And what you do, we typically, once the textbooks are chosen, this year it's reading. Reading is not one of the larger ones because it's primarily the elementary grades. And there's some career and technical education for high school that's included in that. The 6-year cycle for adoption. This is not one of the largest this year. But when we actually order those books are typically June. After the selections, you approve the textbooks. It'll come to you. What is recommended by the textbook committee, and you approve that book. And then we usually place those orders late May, June, and that's when you're going to see that expenditure hit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what may be showing 20 now is not the picture when you actually order so that they'll be ready when school starts in August. You have to order them in June, basically. So
Because-
that number is something to look at. Your insurance there is property, casual, liability, that sort of thing. So to give you an idea of what we're talking about in that, in looking at it, okay?
And we will probably, we have very high thresholds of self-insurance in property and casualty also to help hold down our costs. Basically, what's left, I will write a check to the county insurance fund, and they track Board of Ed money separately from other departments. And we will use that to pay our deductibles, items like that that come through in the course of a year. We have to have our potential liability funded in that fund at the end of any fiscal year.
Could I kind of bring a point up that former board member Doris Jernigan used to remind
Trustees.
the trustees commission? And, you know, certainly do not object, you know, sending whatever amount of money that the trust needs to work from. But I would love to know how much of that 1.9 million goes back.
To education.
That leaves our budget and then goes back to the general fund, you know, what we could do with this access. And, you know, I know none of us would object to, you know, to utilizing what funds that the trustee's office needs, but I suspect a large majority of this leaves us and just goes back into the big pot. And is that basically correct?
That's it. I'd say about 4.5 cents equivalent of the property tax
Yeah.
on our side more than that.
And we could
goes back to
really,
the county.
we could really use this money, and of course, it would take statutory change
Right.
to get that accomplished, but just to carry on Doris's tradition of bringing that to bear, I just couldn't help myself.
It's about $2 million, as you can see here, that's counted in our budget. When people see that number, it includes roughly this year, almost $2 million that's going back as a trustees commission that really you do not get to
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
But that's a statutory requirement, state of Tennessee.
And it's almost, it's flow-through money away from us.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
I just don't understand it.
And
The-
then,
The numbers that are listed for 2011-12
Mm-hmm.
total, are they reflective of the approved budget?
no,
Or are they?
of what we wound up with
That's
as
the
of June
amended
30th.
budget.
Well, no, it's our actual
It's actual.
expenditures, yes.
Okay.
We were about 3 million, we had about 3 million in unexpended appropriations last year
Okay.
on this side.
You mentioned that the bus contracts are something that we have a limited amount of control
Mm-hmm.
over. I understand, you know, once that contract's in
Once
place.
the contract is.
And yet, my friends that are in attendance, that are bus drivers and contractors, say that this is also a contract year for
Right,
buses.
it is.
And so we will have a measure of influence over that.
Yes. And the last yellow highlighted line is the principal and interest that we are paying on the loans we have gotten for energy conservation. And as I said, we have paid off, that number will drop by about 480,000 next year. We'll have a full year on our most recent, the water conservation, but our biggest lighting one was paid off. So that's one positive place.
Is this, I'm sorry, is the substitute contract, is that also a multi-year contract?
That is we have 2 years of renewal, 1 year, and then we can renew for 2 years, and we open the responses to our request for proposal Friday, and those are being evaluated now.
One of the changes this year that you're gonna see different is because they are included, because of Obamacare kicking in, where everybody has to be insured, so you're gonna see your per day cost go up to cover the federal requirement for the insurance, where that hasn't been there in the past, so there'll be some new monies requirement for substitute that'll kick in next year.
So are we in a renewal year, or are we in,
We
we're
are in our
finishing?
final year and preparing to award a contract for next year that could be extended for 2 further years.
Okay, so we're looking at bus contracts being blank slate and substitute contract being blank slate.
Well, I don't know that we can say blank slate, but we have, yeah. Those
Potential.
costs aren't going to drop
Okay,
appreciably in all probability, unless we make some structural changes.
So again, the change for the substitute that you were speaking of, it's that January 2014 kick-in year.
Do we have an idea of how much that's
No,
going to be?
We opened those Friday afternoon, so there was not enough time to do any analysis. Other than, yeah, we have done, we've been checking, questioning some issues and all that, but we're not ready
And
to.
this may need to go to another time, but when we're in that process for the substitutes, there's an amount that we pay for a non-degree and an amount that we pay for a degree.
Right.
So then there's cost on top of that for the service that they provide. And then there's gonna be another cost on top of that
Insurance.
for the health reform initiative. Is that basically
Yes,
correct?
sir.
We had several bidders this time, so that's a fortunate thing. I don't know how many total. Do you remember, Ms. Barnes?
That's 7 submitted bids.
So you got several people interested.
Mr. Odom, to answer the question of substitute teachers, is there a better possibility than this type of contractual relationship that we've used for several years? Is there anything out of the ordinary that we should consider?
You know, what we used to, principals did all the calling, we didn't have them. That was a nightmare. And you had many more classes starting a day without a substitute. I mean, you can remember that. I can remember as a principal calling over 100
Good reason to
on a day.
retire.
You have several, I mean, just, the administration of it is with the number of employees and all that we have, is just a nightmare. And more systems are doing what we're doing. Fewer and fewer, they'd be very small systems that really try to do it all in-house. If you try to do it in-house, when we did the cost analysis a few years ago, you start saying, how many additional people will it take you when you employ people to make the calls for the substitutes? Say the teachers call into somewhere up here. When you're looking at 46 schools next year to make those calls in the morning, that early, track it, total it, it was several employees. When you consider those salaries, the savings that you think are just not there.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
People that are specialists in the area, have the software to do the tracking, can do it more efficiently than you can, actually.
No doubt.
And they also, for some of those folks, they have other jobs they can send them on. We would not, which would hurt us a bit in the retention and in the unemployment compensation issue
Is,
there.
excuse me, is there only one company we're dealing with?
Yes, sir. Yeah,
It will come to you as a board.
right.
In the next meeting or two, probably.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna see that and see what the bids are and see what it is, because it's a contract, so it always comes back to the board.
Yeah. The line with the blue highlighting, that is a subtotal of our non-labor, non-benefit expenditures. I use blue, it ties to the next page. And breaking that down, the line below that is highlighted in yellow, that is the subtotal of the highlighted yellow lines. That 12.6 to 13% of our budget, essentially 35 million, items over which, again, once we have signed our contracts, done whatever, we don't have a lot of control over those. And the bold lines between that is what is left. Some of that is discretionary, some of it really isn't. It's a blend. Our BEP, $200 per teacher, is in that line. We don't have any discretion on that. But 4.5% to 5% of what is left is really discretionary. Once we have made our staffing decisions and have those yellow highlighted lines, we don't have a lot of really discretionary money.
That's your bulleted item, the last one there. Talk about the freezing that we did last year.
Yes.
For those of you that are new, need to know what
We've
we
done
had
it
to do
several
to
times.
freeze it. So if you would cover that
Yeah.
for you. You've got the figure here, but cover that for
And
them.
you know, we made the commitment when we got funding for our 2 middle schools at the depths of the financial crisis that we faced, that we could open those without a property tax increase. And we were using about 6 to 6.5 million of fund balance, and I'll go into that later, each year. Last year, the state was talking either a 2% raise or a 2% non-recurring bonus. Well, we were in favor of the bonus because of our commitment to stay within. We had to freeze expenditures,
We did last
and we came up with another about 2.8 million that we had to use to fund this year's budget from fund balance. And this area in here, primarily the non-highlighted items, are what we froze. And there are definite downsides to that. Deferring some of these expenditures, it will increase our issues, or has increased our issues with obsolete technology or marginal technology. I think we've done pretty good about avoiding deferred maintenance issues, but there are undoubtedly maintenance things we would have done. I think we got the crucial items. Instructional equipment, various things. When you look at what was left, or if you see let me see a line item. Okay, the instructional equipment item, which this year's budget is 1.1 million. In the second column over, you see that line? I'm sorry, I know there are a lot of numbers on this sheet. Last year, we wound up our total expenditures at $592,338. That was one that was easy to say we're freezing. We had to have the money in order to fund this year's operating budget. There are downsides to that, but that is how we got through.
The county commission did the same thing. If you remember, in order to balance their budget, they took their ending fund balance, parts of it, and added it to this year's budget, the 12-13 budget, so that the budget would balance. Well, the same thing with the school system is. Part of the ending fund balance last year was rolled forward to balance this year's budget. That's deficit spending, basically, is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
So that when he talks about this $9,250,000, in that bullet there, that's what you're talking about, rolling forward to do that. And of course, then again, I think there's a commitment that we try to open Stewart's Creek High School also without a tax increase. So whatever the dollar figure takes there, again, has got to come out of your ending fund balance this year so you can roll it forward to pay for it the next year. So that's tough.
Well, we had a concern with that last year,
Yes.
that we were concerned about where the ending fund balance was going to be for this year by robbing it.
Yes, if we had been able to only use 6.5, even 7 million to fund this year's opening budget, and the reasons we weren't, the 2% state raise and a 20% medical insurance increase, I would be very comfortable still saying we should be able to cover Stewart's Creek. Those two expenditures, that was a net of about $5 million. make that a much more challenging situation for this next year than it would have been otherwise. Yeah.
Let me go back to the teacher's salary a minute, talking about what's going on in the legislature now, because we're speculating purely, but initially, if you remember the governor's address and all, he put 1.5% in, basically for raises this year. We typically do that for classified and certified employees. Now, one of the things that they're saying that this 1.5%, and I don't know how much flexibility we have, that they really did not want that to be an across the board. So you begin to think, if you're going to get 1.5%, which is not a huge amount of money to start with, if you're not going to distribute it across the board, how do you distribute it? There's lots of talk out there about, well, give the teachers with the highest scores the most. Let's divide it up that way. Well, here, the evaluation process last year, the total evaluation, 87.3% of our teachers scored a 4 or 5. So what you're looking at, I mean, this is state numbers, not our numbers. Basically, it comes from your value added, comes from your principals component and all dealing with that. So it's going to be really tough if they don't give us some leeway to be equitable and fair in this, when so many of ours in Rutherford County are really scoring near the top. So too early to say how that's going to play out or what guidelines come down with that money. So just alerting you that in our future somewhere is a way to we'll have to deal with that, but right now we don't really know.
Yeah. And at this point in the process, there are so many things we don't know. Just month by month, we will get more information. It will really be in April before we start getting information we can use toward the revenue side. We may not have the information we need to make a decision on the 1.5% until May or later. We just don't know and won't know for a while, so be tolerant.
You'll have the figure, the total,
Yeah.
but how you distribute
Yeah.
it may very well depend on what the legislature or the state does, whoever does that.
Just remind us then of what our timeline is as to when we would be with budget
Right.
together, and then and say we need to present this and we need the commission to approve it.
Okay. We meet on the 18th, and I'll give out the requests from the principals. And we use those mostly, Mr. Clardy uses them in evaluating and scheduling his maintenance budget. What are the crucial projects? How do we use it? On the other side, technology and instructional items, it's more of the money we've got in our budget. How is it going to be? It's kind of a guideline to help us spend it. We get requests all over. We have principals who are very conservative in their requests, who basically come back, just don't take anything I've got. I need what I've got. And we've got principals who have quite a nice wish list. Yeah, we have to come up with something in between. The staff requests, again, kind of give us an idea. Overall, what should we be looking at? We try very carefully in allocating those staff resources to look at the grade structure, the size of the school, when it comes to something like English language learners, how many do they have there? Try to allocate these resources as fairly as we can for the programs we have at the schools. And those requests can help us. One of the things we talked about earlier, Mr. Ruffin, a couple of months ago earlier, is we will probably have to increase our budget for the attendance clerks in schools coming up with a new system.
Historically, while I was in attendance, I would do, well, not attendance, but instruction, would submit part of the budget of potential growth, how many positions, that sort of thing. I found out over the years that I did that very likely for about every 20.2 or 3 students, and that's K through 12, you're almost going to need a teaching position. And the way that works is because we basically do not have a lot of reserve. For example, if you have a 1-to-20 ratio in K through 3, which is the state, you can go to 20.49 technically. But if you're already running 19.2 in a school. It's not when 20 more students come in. It may be when 2 more students come in. You know, but if we were in the neighborhood, Musper City for a while ran into the pupil-teacher ratios of 1 to 16, 1 to 17 or so. You have more power to absorb smaller numbers, but when you're running in such high, as close to the max that we have, it's difficult to do. So that's why you kind of got the 1 to 20. I saw numbers in the years that I was about 9 years over there, from anywhere in a year from around 60 teachers to almost 140 teachers. That year we had like 1,800 students here that came in 1 year, brand new students, you know. So it ranged in that whole wide range of what it took to meet the pupil-teacher ratio. And that's what we're trying to do now. Why we don't have you a set number tonight is because we're looking at moving 50, 60 teachers maybe from Smyrna, Laverne. We're looking at those numbers to move, but we got to know how many on the specific grandfathers, that sort of thing, how many's left, so we can get our numbers. But very definitely we'll be moving some staff, offering opportunities for people to move to the new high school before we pick up some of these new positions. But that's the part that we don't have, cannot nail down for you tonight, you know, simply because we got to do that. But that's why we're having several meetings.
6 years ago, I felt like we were ahead of the curve, you know, with most of the districts in this state with technology. I don't think we are anymore. And with Common Core testing, does the governor's, what he has proposed to help the systems with updating computers and other technology areas, will that get it done for us, or are we going to continue to lag behind?
Probably not entirely. And I've shared this number with you before. Our initial information was we were getting about 2.1 million for the upgrade, getting ready for the Common Core assessments, the online assessments, that sort of thing. It was higher than what I saw for Knox, higher than what I saw for Hamilton. So as I mentioned before, our people in technology did a very good job of analyzing what we needed and transferring that to the state in the form of the request. To answer your question, the big thing is how much is it going to take us on the hardware end to increase the pipe size, which is how many megs can you carry at one time, you know, when you have all these people that's going to be taking tests at about the same time. When you do that, when we put in more of the nodes for the routers within the school to do the wireless, how much is spent on that? But you've got to handle the big infrastructure pieces to carry the load, to do the wireless piece. And then what's left, I think, would begin to look at replacing the what's in the school as far as the PCs themselves and those particular pieces. And we're behind. I mean, some of your schools, you can go to Blackman or some of them, which you think is still fairly a new school, but in the technology world, you get 10 years ago, you're behind. Some of our PCs will not even run. When we purchase a textbook, very often there'll be software that comes with that textbook to help students, which is very good. But we run into cases where it will not run it unless we go out. We actually in the past have purchased additional memory, but you're running into problems now with just simply the Windows operating system. So what we're saying the other day, the first year of the park testing, you can run Windows 7 or so or something. In 14, 15, it'll have to be at least Windows 8 or something like that. So we have all of that data. I mean, we know how many computers and where they are that have this operating system and that operating system, and so it's going to be a prioritization to do that. So, and you're going to be a part of that. We're going to let you know where we are, but that's still in the process. We have not technically received the 2.1 million yet, or told you. I mean, this is the estimated amount, but it'll be interesting to see if something plays out between now and then as a one-time state expenditure.
Are we still under a mandate to have 6
We adjusted
computers in every classroom?
No, we basically adjusted that. Basically, what we're doing now is we try to do about one for every 5 students, and that what we're looking at now is what we. And of course, that would be the class size. So if you're in the 1 to 20, 20 in a second grade classroom or something, you're probably talking more in terms of 4, and the teachers. And very often now in middle schools and high schools, there's some pooling of resources to open a computer lab, you know. But basically, I think you can say pretty much for Rutherford County, counting older machines, it's pretty close to 1 to 5.
Well, I guess maybe more where I'm headed to this, do we have any sense of how much those are used? Because I frankly never thought that putting 6 computers in a classroom, in every classroom was practical, because I think there's a lot of those classrooms that sit and don't get used. Pooling them together and putting them into places where you can do always made more sense to me than, and I have, through my experience of being in schools now with student teachers, I don't get a sense that they are used anywhere close to what they need to be or could be or should be, or and if they're not used, it's a lot of money sitting there to upgrade something that's not going to get used, and I just wonder how much they are used and how.
Our STS, is Track School Technology Specialists, track much of that for us. So we do have some figures in what school. The other side of it is, and this is showing up in your building programs now, when you go from moving them there to the labs, how many labs? And that's a construction cost. That's another room. When you design a building, that's another one that you put the drops and that sort of thing to make that connection. But we'll look and see if we can tell you. But we know in some places used very well, and other places not as much.
From a cost standpoint, and again, I'm not a technology person, so y'all can tell me, but it strikes me that laptops that could be portable make a lot more sense than units that have to sit in a room, and that way you don't have to build a special classroom for that. You got 25 on it that you can check in and out. They can move to this classroom. You're not having to dedicate space to it, and
we're doing that in a number of those that you're talking about, those where we buy a rack, and put the 20 or 25 on that to make sure you get them charged up at night, sure. That sort of thing and all to do. But yes, in recent years, gosh, there's been, I couldn't say how many of those portable labs that we have, but that's been one of the most attractive things that we've done in recent years. Exactly what you're talking about. To help this is one of the reasons we did bring your own device too.
Sure.
As we try to help this is some.
Well, I'm just, the point I'm trying to get to is I think I'm right that there's a lot of classrooms with 6
Probably.
Units sitting in them that are not being used, and that's we just don't have the money to do that. There's got to be a better way to make that work out, and I'm not being critical of teachers for not using them. I'm just simply saying that if they're not going to be used, then it just doesn't make much sense to spend that kind of money, because it's substantial, of course.
The original plan was to do interventions with students that the classroom teacher, especially in the elementary school, where they're self-contained most of the day. And that's where it started. It really started, I think Stewartsboro maybe in the first one, maybe back in the 80s or something like that. But it was designed that the teacher would have one for every about 5 or 6 students. Then as a student was getting behind or something, you would be able to take those students, 3, 4, 5, put them on the computers where they're still monitored with a teacher in the classroom, and make up the work, do that sort of thing, and do the tutoring, the intervention piece for that. Of course, the whole process of interventions changed quite a bit in recent years. At that time, almost all your interventions came on a CD or a disc, or it had to be on your server. And of course now, much of those are even wireless, coming even from outside of our system that's being done, that's furnished with your textbooks and all.
I'm curious about, again, the way that revenue is expressed here. We see a lot of times in the monthly meetings that expenditures have been made and supported by booster clubs. In addition to that, we have on the consent agenda those supplements that are beyond my new term tonight, BS and 5, beyond that. And so we're tracking those as well. Is there a way for us to reflect to those who would review our budget how much additional revenue comes through our system, through the support of those booster organizations? Would it be a positive statement to track that?
The last time that came up at the commission, the opinion was we should be able to cut what we pay schools because of what is out there in school activity funds and boosters.
Okay.
It was not being used in a supportive way.
All right. How about the grants that we see either from, outside parties or from other specific applications? Can we account for that, and can we show?
Those do flow through either the general purpose school budget or some of them through a federal projects, or some of them through the school activity funds. So there is some tracking.
What you're looking at here, typically those things do not show in your initial budget.
Right.
Because your county body is not funding them. So you may start out with a $279 million budget before the end of the year, when Jeff, as you start getting to May and he keeps coming to you week after week, we now have to amend in, the state's increased this, we've received grants for this. So you're going to see over the next few months, those things will play out. And so when you show the total expenditure for the year, you started with that budget amount, but it's going to, all of those things have to appear in your accounting, but they will appear basically as amendments to the initial budget. And of course, what we have to do is the initial budget for 13-14, and so the pattern's likely to occur even next year. They don't show up front typically.
I guess my intent and my interest is it possible for us to show good stewardship to the county commission, and are they interested in even hearing the argument, to say that in addition to what the county has invested in the school system, we have gone and pursued and captured these dollars through grant funding. In addition to that, we have saved the county these dollars through energy conservation and such. And is there any place in the budget presentation for us to accentuate the things that we have done that are basically good stewardship?
On the energy conservation, some of those things are so nebulous. We can show lower dollars or lower usage. Well, how much of that is, yes, in our natural gas and our electricity, how much of that is climate driven for a particular year? It may, several years ago, we had horrendous spikes in both the electrical and the natural gas rates. The number of factors you would really have to take into account. I have, one of my staff members keeps for me a massive 3 spreadsheets, usage by utility. We don't have it broken out into demand usage on the electric side. There are additional things we could do. We don't have the resources to track that. I have one of my staff members who spends a couple of days as the fiscal year is winding down, pulling together a school activity fund and numbers that are asked for in the state report. I have what we had last year. I would basically, there will be next year 44 different sets of school books out there. The chart of accounts that the state prescribes that we use does not separate the revenues from the expenditures in most of those. So my staff members have to go through, run general ledger detail, and okay, in this account that has a net balance of $5,000, we had $18,000 in revenue and $13,000 in expenditures, account by account. I have to have staff to get into anything like that above what we do on that annual report.
And I can't recall very many grants that have come our way that have taken the place of permanent money. Most
No,
of
they,
those-
they are
most of
not
those
designed to
grants
do that.
Have been
really.
written by in-house, either administrators or certified employees for an initiative that they wanted to have happen for their students, for their school. So that's not money that we've actually already budgeted for, it's things that,
Well,
You're talking supplanting.
Yes.
Which in the federal definition and all, if you get a grant or something, you supplant what you're spending already, then you'll be paying it back. So, I mean, Title I, lots of things like that, especially so, always you're dealing with a supplanting issue. It has to be a new initiative to add to, that sort of thing, or it's considered as a supplanting item. But you used it to reduce your expenditures, and that way it's not really a grant for an improvement. It's a supplanting.
Yeah, and I could show you where we were as of June 30th as far as our federal projects, and they are still estimates of the school activity funds because our auditors, by the time we have to file the report, have not completed. I can show you what that tends to be, but as far as, I think more of the grants you're talking about, they come through on the budget amendments, as Mr. Odom said. I know that we will have some grants, because we typically get them every year, for staff development. I put and I'm not sure what I put in last year. I used to put in $25,000 a year in donations and $25,000 a year in expenditures for staff development. That happened regularly enough, and I've increased the number. I just don't remember what it is now. That piece I budget, but the others come through as amendments or are buried in the school activity funds or in a federal project. And we don't have the resources to go. If your chart of accounts is not set up to capture something, and to non-accounts, I realize this doesn't make any sense, but when you get a request for some analysis where your chart of accounts does not capture it, you have to go into the accounts payable expenditures and everything else pulling it out. If it's not something you pull by vendor or something like that, that's just a limitation in accounting, whatever the chart is. So,
I would think, to me, the best way we can influence the commission to provide a budget that we ask for is to continue to show we're under the state average and continue to be above the state average as far as is what we're able to accomplish. And I think that is our easiest and best argument that we can make. And argument is not the right word. Position we can take. Commission has accepted that position very well, and right now we're $1,000 under the state average in expenditures. We're above the state average in what we accomplish. Pretty simple to see, pretty simple to understand, and I don't know. We need to break it down a lot more than that. I do think it's well worth pointing out when we have our joint committee meeting. I think it's worth pointing out at that particular point in time that there are thousands, and it just doesn't take long to figure it out that there's lots of monies that go into our schools that are not budgeted by what we do. And it's not what we do, it's what our boosters do and what our parents do. And I think they're to be commended, not us, that they do those kind of things. But I do think the commission is aware of that.
You saw a $17,000 scoreboard by Booster Club last week.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, so there's numbers of those all the time. You ready? You ready
Yes.
to kind of look at that one? If you-
ready to move to the horizontal page with pink, blue, and green cells.
Would you believe Jeff is colorblind?
Yes, I was very careful on what colors I used. I do not use red to indicate negatives. I use blue because I can't tell them apart consistently. I tried that one meeting, it was a disaster. I sat there and I was guessing. On this page, just if you want to try to tie back and forth, the pink cells on both pages tie you to the same number on the other page, as do the blue cells. Just if you want to see in going from point to point, going back and forth, they do tie. Very, very, very important for accounts to make that clear. Our page back. And as Mr. Odom said, it's very early in this process. The staffing numbers I'm showing in that first column at the top of the horizontal page, that is our current staff. At this point, putting in that 1.5% raise, even though we don't know how it will, we don't know if it'll make it through the process or how it will be used. Our benefits, Social Security, Medicare, state retirement. And the third number down is our medical insurance. And that $238,372,000 is nearly $8 million more than our budgeted figures for those expenditures. The raise comes out, the 2% that shows in the fourth column over on staff is the 1.5% raise, and then through our salary schedules, the changes in degree and experience. If you work a year, you get another year of experience. For teachers, most of the first 15 years there is
An annual increase.
an increase built into the salary schedule. For classified staff, it's more every 2 to 4 years on that salary schedule. But those raises built into the salary schedule are about 0.5% at this point. That will change. We are still getting the information from the teachers on the anticipated degrees they will have in place. So those numbers I know will change. The medical let me back up a bit. Most years it's a few major issues we have to deal with. This year, opening Stewart's Creek High School, we will probably have about 45 new teaching positions plus the support staff. The number of teachers, as Mr. Odom mentioned, that we will be able to transfer from the feeding high schools is absolutely crucial. If we could open it with only 35 new positions, or 30, that would be great. It would really help us. But it will depend on what we can pull as we look at the enrollment numbers at all of the high schools. And Mr. Odom wanted me to mention this, just if the technology, library books, those are covered in the building program budget. We won't have any GP expense for those items at Stewart's Creek. It will be utilities and staff. We might be a little heavier on textbooks since we're getting them out there for another school, because all the schools like to have a little latitude for those late transfer students and all that. In our growth positions, we'll need to be able to cover 2.5% to 3% of growth. Medical insurance, definitely in the news. I mentioned our 20% increase that went into effect in January. At the school board, we pay our premiums September through the end of June, 10 premiums. Our employees and we as a school board pay nothing in July and August. So in this year's budget, we have 6 months with that 20% increase. In next year's budget, we will have September, October, November, and December where that 20% increase is hit. Then in January 2014, I have estimated at 8%. The story in the News Journal where they were talking about the $2.5 million attributable to the Affordable Health Care Act. Well, I've built in an 8% increase because we have to look at our history, our claims history. We have a meeting later in the week where we're going to get into this. And then there is also a $63 per covered life charge. It's a 3-year basically tax on self-insured plans that will become effective in January of 2014. So, and that covered life means if you are a teacher or you are a school bookkeeper and your spouse and 2 children are covered, we would pay the $63 for all 4 covered individuals. If you're just have individual cover, we'd pay the coverage, we'd pay the $63 for you. That is an additional increase that I have an estimate built in for this $35.5 million.
That was part of your question a little bit ago. That's that $63
Yeah.
per covered person. That's new.
Yeah. We are hearing 63. Some people are still saying it could go as high as 90. I built in 63. We, of course, will have the additional bus routes and a new bus contract. We have 229 existing routes, if I counted right, Mike?
No, it's 228.
Okay. Okay, well, 228. And Mr. Snell seems to think we'll need another 9 next year, so.
Correct. That part's correct.
That number made me happier than some I've seen in the past, Mr. Snell. And then our substitute contract, we'll have a new contract there. And the medical insurance, from looking at what appear to be the 3 low bids and that initial appraisal, won't be as much as it potentially could have been. But I think all vendors are saying we may have to reevaluate that after the first year that is in effect. A lot of the subs will not meet that part-time employee test, but some of them will. I don't know how many that will be. So, and all of those rules are still coming in, being defined and all that. On this sheet, I kind of had to start backwards because we are so early, and basically every year we kind of have to start backwards. We start with our expenditure side. Theoretically, you'd start with your revenue side. We don't know enough. I mean, anything I went and put into revenue would be such a guess at this point. But in April, we will start getting some decent revenue projections. And the expenditure projections will be much better as we've got another month or 2 in. Normally, we get an April estimate of the next year's BEP allocation. There was 1 year we didn't get it, but normally we do, and hopefully, and that has gotten much better in recent years, hopefully it will have the change in like the TASER index that affects how state versus local contribution mandates on the BEP. If it's complete enough to have that, have updated insurance numbers and all that, I have a pretty good number for BEP at that point. If they haven't been able to get those factors in, if the legislation hasn't progressed far enough, I might not have such a good number. But
Let's mention something else about
Yes,
the
sir.
revenue, which he has in the green there. Mr. Holliday was up there the other night. He was with Health and Ed. One of the things that kind of hit me that is somewhat problematic is that they estimate how much growth Rutherford County, how much the tax base increases annually. The taxable base, new housing, that sort of thing. And if you remember, it was 1/2 or 1%. And they have not seen, in every other, where they tracked it back to the years, it went from 4% to 11% annual growth that's taxable. But this year, the projection is 1/2 or 1%. So which means that your tax base, because the economy and property is not being valued higher, that's an abnormally low growth for Rutherford County. Am I correct? You were
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, even to the extent that after the meeting, I was told that many of the appeals that have been made against property valuation have all, come back, in the favor of the property owner, and that there are many, many more appeals than they're accustomed to. So even when appraisals might increase a property's value, the rate of appeal and the result of that are not in favor of increasing revenue.
Sales tax is up, so.
Yes,
That's good, so
by statute, we get half of that.
that's the good side.
Well, and next bullet down, and I have the fund balance numbers in green on this sheet. As I said, to fund this year's budget, we used $9,253,756. And if you look on the second column of numbers over, for the 2013 budget, we budgeted $270,428,000. We, again, took from fund balance, made sure we had it there, $9,253,000. And we've gotten 100, I have other revenue amendments I'll be bringing. We'll cross 280 million this year. But the reserve and fund balance that we used in our budget, $279,780,000. That, if you look up to the cell below the blue cell, that is our budgeted total expenditures. When our budget is passed, anything we use from fund balance plus our revenues has to equal our total budgeted expenditures. And that the difference between these, the other green number, the 6,460,000 versus the 952,000, that would have been equivalent to about 5.6 cents if that had been funded from property tax. And I'm very grateful we were able to fund it this way, but it puts us in more problematic shape for this year's budget. That $6.5 million, when you have a $280 million budget, you're much more likely to be able to, on a sustainable year-to-year basis, come up with $5.5–6 million, about 2–2.5% of your budget, unless revenues are dropping. Unspent budgeted expenditures. If you have a $280 million budget and you only spend $275, that $5 million of budgeted expenditures that you don't spend increase your fund balance. If the economy is headed down, if you had $280 million budgeted in revenues and only got $278, your fund balance would drop $2 million. So we have to watch the action between the two. And when the economy is really picking up, you remember Mr. Blair, Mr. Hodge, we've seen years where we've gotten $3–4 million in unbudgeted revenues that we've amended into fund balance at the end of the year. We haven't seen that in a while, but our sales tax is doing well. We hope it continues to do well.
There's a ratio that we like to have in fund balance.
I am, and our fund balance, and there are a lot, we get comments at the commission very often from citizens who have concerns that we keep excessive amounts. I like to keep 4.5–5%. That basically is our equity, and yes, it belongs to the taxpayers, but if revenues go down, it's a cushion for us. It provides more stability in our tax rate. If we have that year where utilities just went up and up and up and up, I think we took $3.5 million out of fund balance for utilities that year. We had never had to do that before. They just all kept, the diesel price adjustment, we were paying the bus contractors, natural gas, and electricity, just all of them headed up the second half of the year. We were able to take the money out of fund balance. Now, we can, in the course of a year, we can drop under 3% in fund balance. But when your budget is adopted, there is a test where you have to have 3% of your non-capital portion of your budget left in fund balance to open the year. Now, you can, if you have to, you can amend out. You can do it July 2nd if you wanted to. But as of the start of July, when you open, you have to have 3%.
It was also brought up in that health and ed meeting that the county's fund balance was one of the critical elements that allowed us to refinance
Yes.
some bond
Yes.
issuance down to 2.1%.
Yeah.
And the interest savings that the county would realize from being able to refinance down to such a low percentage was discussed at that health and ed meeting. But what was really critical was how important the fund balance was to those bondholders as they examined the credit worthiness of Rutherford County.
Right.
And so, you know, the importance of the fund balance and its stability was really pointed out.
Well, and that is one of the, again, when there's that criticism of the total fund balance across the county, that if we did not have that policy and keep that much in that fund, we could see 50-cent to dollar swings in the property tax rate if we kind of smooth out that repayment of interest and principal. If we just had it, well, we're going to raise the tax this year to pay this bond payment, we would see horrendous swings, which would be very unpopular with people. Well, I think I've gone enough over the fund balance there. Under that bullet, I've got a small Roman numeral 1 and 2. I've talked about those items earlier. The two items, the two expenditures that made us go deeper into fund balance last year. The 20% increase in medical insurance and the state teacher raise through the BEP. Well, we got about $2.5 million, 2 or 2.5, in additional state BEP revenue toward that. But it cost us $5.5 million. So so we had about a net $3 million increase in expenditure that we actually, and I was hoping it would be non-recurring. Many of the finance directors were hoping it would be non-recurring, so we wouldn't have, because, well, the state decided it would not be. It is recurring, so that is an ongoing expenditure that will make it a bit tighter going into next year. And I couldn't get a hold of Lisa today in the afternoon. For this current year's budget, a new penny would have generated $495,640 for our budget. It will probably be just under or at $500,000 for us. A penny is worth less to us because the property tax, the sales tax, and the other local taxes are shared with the city school system. So the city school system gets a share of any penny. So that's why it's worth less to us than the county general government.
Is it roughly 16% now of our
14.3.
14.3?
Yes.
We've been growing at a faster rate than they are.
Yeah. When they open a school, they will typically grow at a faster rate than we will. We'll kind of gain back, but that's been headed down the 15 years I've been here. And we will get additional money out of this year's property and sales tax because in the budget, we didn't budget that large a share being county. So that made me happy, Lisa happy. And again, Mr. Odom and I have kind of addressed this. When the construction of Stewart's Creek High was approved, we said that we would try to open that school without a property tax increase. And, keeping that commitment will be much more challenging because we now know we will have 2 years of state salary increases and another year of noticeably higher medical insurance costs.
You mentioned the salary schedules and how they impact automatic increases. Are those salary schedules open to board influence?
As long as you meet the state.
As long, we don't know what's happening with the state. Yes and no. There are state minimums that to this point we have been required to meet. On the classified salary schedule, yes. But, and I will be getting you copies of those schedules, as we move through this process. I just try and hold things to a minimum.
In general, would you say that even on the certified side of the salary schedules, that we are above the state minimums?
Yes.
We are above the state minimums, but in compared to comparably sized counties, we're not. We're not on the high side by far. Metro, and did Memphis do it also, Mr. Odom? Memphis was discussed. Last year, Metro went to a $40,000 minimum teacher salary.
That's another place we get I hesitate to use the word bargain, but if you'll look and see where Rutherford County teaching salaries compare statewide, we're nowhere close to the area up here that we are based upon the results we're able to get. And I mean, it's a credit to our teachers, it's a credit to our community, frankly, that people prefer to teach here when they could go someplace else and teach for a little bit more. It's not a huge difference, it's not embarrassingly small, but for the results we get, we're getting a very nice dividend from our teachers based upon what they're paid comparatively to other systems around us.
When Jeff mentioned the TASER index, and that's used to be the Fox. Is it what?
And this is a blend of TASER and Fox. Now I couldn't think of the other.
They're putting them together, and of course, what that is, they measure from other factors. I don't know, a Gini or something. The county's ability to pay. So when they look at the available tax base for Rutherford County, they look at the average income for Rutherford County and compare that to Hancock County or somewhere else and look at it. When the state monies come down, you're going to get less, than some counties that do not have the base of Rutherford County. So it's not straight all across the state, and it's based on that TASER index.
And we are probably, since we are, the 6th largest system?
We are the 6th.
We probably get the largest percentage of state funding of those, well, even Memphis though does, I think we get the largest percentage of state funding. Now, when you go into like Clarksville, Montgomery, but we get a lot more state funding percentage-wise than Williamson County does because of that index.
At the next meeting, you're going to have much more numbers and counts and that sort of thing tonight to kind of give you an overview of the budget, where we are. The challenges I see it tonight is the ending fund balance. How much will we have to carry forward to balance next year's budget, to open Stewart's Creek High School? I mean, that is the unknown. But you begin to see, if you're talking 3% of a not quite $300 million budget, but you're looking at, that alone would be $9 million, not including opening Stewart's Creek High School and the cost associated with that. So you're looking at having to have a substantial ending fund balance at the end of this year to go into next year, plus anything that you need to balance the budget. The 3%, whatever you have to carry forward to balance your budget, whatever it takes to open Stewart's Creek High School is a substantial figure for Rutherford County.
Several dollars.
Mr. Odom, you mentioned that you wanted to hear from the board anything that we had in our minds of specific expenditures. And so I'll voice a few things.
Okay.
Not that I anticipate that there's opportunity to put these in, because Stewart's Creek High School is certainly going to take such a large percentage. But I guess, Mr. Sandvig, I'm on that side of the principals that have a long wish list.
We'll give you those.
Yeah, I'll throw the wish list out there anyway. We have a set aside for maintenance. There's a 0.5% or a penny or something that Mr. Clardy talks about that is ongoing maintenance.
It is, and with the property tax or the reappraisal years, it is now that 4.51 cents of the property tax, major capital projects fund.
There we go. All right.
Roofing, HVAC, paving.
We have seen the benefit of that, and in maintaining our buildings and having that specifically allocated. We always voice as a board our commitment to getting rid of portables. And if we had in some way a proposal for the, that out-of-the-box county commission request for bring us something we haven't seen before, a proposal of portable retirement. We would like to get rid of portables in our schools and intentionally do so with a set-aside allocation of funds at some level. I think that could be something that would be a small percentage. It wouldn't look like much on year one, but as the years go by, could really benefit our system. There is talk about the AVID program at Smyrna High School and the potential impact of it. It is not a large dollar expenditure. It's probably in there somewhere, but I just wanted to voice for the people of Smyrna High School that are going to be impacted by Stewart's Creek's opening, that academic program.
We've actually covered it for next year.
Great.
Between Jennings Jones Foundation, and we put about 8,000 in it, something like that, am I right?
You and I need to meet on some items like that.
And to do that, to get there 25 or 30,000 startup year. So
Sure.
it's covered.
Excellent.
And they put in a little bit at Smyrna High.
Oakland Middle School has requested in years past that the IB program be extended into Oakland Middle. We've looked at it and tried. There are staffing requirements there, specifically for foreign language, that we may not be able to answer. But I know that it's a worthy project, and if the opportunity presented itself, I want to keep it out there as well. I also would like to see a pilot program somewhere in the system of online textbooks as we ramp up the possibilities of the bring your own device and what that does, close behind some type of online textbook program that we can examine for its viability as we look toward the future.
Anybody else? You got anything else, Stoll?
No, sir. Just shoot us an email or call us or something if as you look and think over this as other pieces so that we can.
I'd like to just say, Mr. Sandvig, I appreciate the job you did on this.
Thank you, sir.
It's a good start, and I think it helps us all understand a little bit better. Getting started with the whole process. So, next meeting on this is the 18th of March.
Yes.
Next week, I believe we've got a board work session and board meeting. So, nobody else has anything further. We'll stand adjourned.